No worries.
All right, everybody, we are live again. Dynasty Mirror, search for a Huru. Before we get started, a couple of announcements. Announcement number one: tour Nigeria for the Oshun Festival, August 13th to the 19th. August 13th to the 19th. If you're interested in joining, please go to dynastymirror.com. Send me a message. Then we have another tour coming up, Sierra Leone collaboration. Me and Blacksit, December 4th through the 12th. We are rolling, you guys. I'm hoping and praying to the gods, to the ancestors, that this coronavirus situation slows down by June. And so we could at least travel. So that's what's going on. Guys, like, share, and subscribe if you are new to the platform. As far as me, I'm getting better every day. Uh, Still kind of congested, but as you guys know, I contracted coronavirus. I was in the hospital a couple of days, so it's definitely real. Definitely real. Falcon Black, I'm sorry about your loss.
Yeah,
As far as your father-in-law, sorry about that.
condolences.
Yeah, man, but it's definitely real. So, we're gonna. My brother Dave, who's on with us today, is in the UK, and so we're gonna really discuss how this is impacting Black people in the UK. Because I know it's hitting the Black community hard here in America. In fact, they're asking for like the demographics as far as by race, as far as who's passing away from um, coronavirus, who's contracting it. So that's what's going on. So Dave, what's up, brother? It's been a minute.
Indeed, it has. And again, just glad to hear that you're on your recovery route and that you're getting better and that. But yeah, how is this affecting us globally? I really, really, really am starting to get quite concerned seeing the stats coming out of the US, obviously looking at how it's affecting Black communities. I remember seeing something particularly about like Louisiana, Illinois, big disparities. Something that's different in the UK is that we often don't have as much data readily available based on racial demographics. I mean, it's a widely known and publicized thing that a lot of studies are looking at this and it affects men different, not different, but men are taking a bulk of the share of a lot of cases and a lot of deaths. But we don't have that readily available for us with regards to Black Brits, as in what is visible to us, what's available to us from mainstream and non-mainstream news. And particularly as Black Brits and Black people across the globe, I think we need to always remember that yes, there's always danger when we can see the stats that show that we're being affected by something disproportionately, but we also have to be very, very, very cautious and remember that we need to have certain statistics and things recorded initially so that if there is something that is out there that influences us more than others, we can legitimately have it in front of us. Now, I know that a lot of people don't trust the government and all that type of stuff, and I get that. But in terms of what we politically rally on, in terms of what we go marching in the streets and be writing letters and talking about and all that type of stuff, yes, we need to talk about colorism. Yes, we need to talk about all them other things and all that type of stuff. Some people say maybe we don't need to talk about it so much, but we need to start also talking about those types of things. We need to make sure we have our data for our communities as well as anybody else does.
Absolutely. Did you get tested before you got bad off? What happened with me, I'll give you my timeline. Around
Mm.
March 13th, I started feeling off. And so I was thinking, because in Georgia, the pollen and allergy season is so bad. Like, this is around the time of the year I get my allergies and I'm miserable.
Yeah.
So I was thinking it was just allergies. So, I go through the week, I work out a couple days. Some days I'm hurting. So I'm thinking it's allergies. March 20th, I I'm like that night, that Friday night, like I'm just going through it. Like muscle pain. I can't breathe. I can't walk up and down the stairs. So I called my frat brother and I'm like, something's not right. He was just like, well, just call the doctor, call the ambulance. So I called the ambulance. They took me to the doctor. This is another thing, Dave. How does it work with insurance, like health insurance?
Oh
Or
wow.
is everything
Um,
by the government?
yeah, you see, that's a very big difference for us over here. We don't fear necessarily the immediate financial hit of these types of things. That's another thing that actually, from a human being perspective, I feel very sorry for people who unfortunately are not like insured or don't have the money behind it. Because for me, I'm not going to ever worry about that. God forbid that I ever wind up in any type of serious situation. We don't pay for the NHS. You know, we pay taxes. If we get sick, we call an ambulance. That's it. We don't think about money at all. Like the average normal person. A lot of people have good jobs with good companies, and they might get private as like a add-on to your job. Like, but again, the types of jobs that are offering that, I mean, those are very, you're usually doing quite very, very well in life. Like if your job is offering you additional health insurance, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, certain people, if you work in a physical domain where like you have to insure your body for your work, that might be a different thing. But in terms of the average normal Black Brit, yeah, like when we call an ambulance, that's just it. We just call an ambulance, we get the treatment. You might have to pay a little bit for a prescription, and even how much you pay for a prescription pales in comparison to you lot.
No.
Like I saw $30,000 or $20,000 in all of this type of medical bills and stuff. Like, is it a massive like kind of price tag in the US?
Yeah, Dave. So I have my insurance, but when I
Yeah.
first went to the hospital, I didn't have my card on me. So they sent me a bill, which is the bill I'm sending to my insurance company, an ambulance ride. Okay, for me to take the ambulance from my house to Grady Hospital, which is probably maybe 2.5 miles away. That was $1,400, 1,400 USD.
Wait. What? Wait a second.
Hold on, I
Did
got the
you?
bill right here. Hold on, hold
Oh
on,
my God! Oh my day!
hold on. I think I got the bill. The bill's around here somewhere. I just gotta find it.
Like I'm not even joking. Yeah, my heart is actually just pumping, thinking of the idea that if I called an ambulance, they charge me a bag plus for what? I mean, obviously I get it, and I understand that that's the way it goes for a lot of people around the world. But damn.
Yeah. It's around here somewhere. So I'm just thinking of the people who are coming down with something that don't have insurance.
And isn't there like I see that there was some like 10 million people unemployed, and if your employment tends
Yeah,
to
you're
be the main
unemployed.
place of
You lose your insurance.
and why it can't get any worse. Like wow, like insurance will literally be
Hold
the
on, let me
life.
try to find this. I want to show this to you guys. Let me try to find this bill. Hold on.
Insurance will be the life and death of people, and huge numbers of people just lost their ability to fight this. That is some very concerning stuff, and I think it also highlights the need for us to, take economics, business, whatever it takes. Like we gotta take certain things, certain levels serious. I mean, I'm not saying people don't.
Now, my insurance company took care of this bill, right?
Yeah.
Let me just cover my information real quick. So the first time I went to the hospital, this was on the 24th. I think I stayed the night. My total bill was $8,349. And hold on,
Woo!
hold on.
Woo! Yo!
My total bill
Oh
was
my
8,000
God!
and some change.
Oh my day!
Now,
Wow,
just imagine if you don't have insurance.
bro! Oh my God! That. How, so legit, yeah. If you don't have insurance, yeah,
Oh,
and
let me try to find this ambulance bill, man. I just want to.
that wasn't the ambulance bill.
No, that wasn't the ambulance bill. That's when I had to actually stay the night.
All of them numbers, and that didn't cover. Wow,
I'm trying
wow.
to find the actual ambulance bill. Hold on one sec. Hold on one second.
I mean, I've rarely ever needed an ambulance in my life, but I've never thought of the whole, can I afford it? That is frightening. That is frightening.
It's around here somewhere, man. But yeah, that ambulance bill was $1,400.
Wow. I mean, even just that alone is, I think of a lot of people at like kind of the bottom end of like the economic ladder, and I think how frightening is that? You're in a position now where, you know, it's not like I broke my leg, you know, skiing or doing some like wild X Games type stuff or something. It's like, bro, this is a nasty infectious thing that like you can pick up from other people's dirtiness
Yeah.
and dirty behavior, bro. Like,
Yeah, I'm trying. I want to find this ambulance bill. Like I saw
Jesus.
that, I'm like, golly. But you know, thank God I have insurance.
Yeah.
You know,
So what would happen then if, for example, you were just walking down the street and then like a drunk driver hits you with his car or something that's completely not your fault, and that what if you can't afford that bill?
well, the thing is, if like something like that were to happen, hold on, let me get back in focus. Hold on, damn, come on, get back in focus. If something like that were to happen, if the drunk driver has insurance, car insurance, you could go after his insurance company.
Oh, but that's still an extra thing to do, like,
Yeah.
and that wow. And again, that's a frightening thing. Again, though, even from our perspective over this side of the in the UK, even though we're not going to face that one at, you know, huge bills and that, the the amount of jobs that have been lost, massive. The types of industries that have been affected, you know, widespread. And unfortunately, it's going to be those who were traditionally most hit hardest by the austerity that we just kind of went through for the past however many years. The people that have been getting hit the hardest, and it does often include large portions of the black community in the UK that are going to potentially see the after effect of this. You know, there's going to come a point where we we do come out of this, you know, eventually, and afterwards, like immediately afterwards, like we're gonna see a very different world. There's gonna be a lot of big companies that don't come back. There's gonna be a lot of small companies that don't come back, and I can only hope that we come back strong and try and see that there's only so many warnings that you kind of, I think that you kind of get. You know, other things are kind of, you know, we can't just say like, oh well, we've survived this and we survived that. Like, no, like trust, like we've got some serious thinking to do, in my opinion. And I think it comes from across the board. I would say for the, like, I give a little bit of a kind of analogy, and I kind of say like your kind of vote taps and Black Lives Matters lot and all that type of stuff. I call them the black political left. And then you have a black political right. Well, this is one of them things where it don't matter what your background is. It don't matter whether you Amun Ra praying to the Egyptian gods and gods.
I'm a Raw passed away. I don't know if you
Oh
knew.
wow, wait, oh snap, Amun Ra, like the person like passed away.
Yeah, that's on my channel. Yeah, he passed away.
Oh my wow. I
Yeah.
wasn't even making a direct to him, and again, condolences again. Like, did he was it unforeseen or I guess it all is unforeseen,
I mean,
really.
I'm gathering bits and pieces, but this is my thing. I am a proponent. I believe in taking herbs and holistic medicine. I am all for that. But there comes a certain point where you need to get professional help and go to
Absolutely,
a doctor. And what's
absolutely.
going on, you have these herbalists, so-called herbalists, or whatever you want to call it,
Oh,
who
we're gonna
read a couple um, Dr. Savvy books, they read a couple of Dr. Africa books, and now they think they're professionals. And so my thing is, I'm all about the prevention, taking your black seed oil, your ginger, whatever. I'm all for
yeah,
that. I do that. But there comes a point where you're gonna have to, if something happens, you have to just go to the doctor and see a professional that is educated and has a degree and has spent years studying certain parts of the body.
absolute. And you know
And
what?
so my understanding, Amir Ra kind of refused to
Oh
go to the doctor. He
oh
did the herbal route, and it didn't work out. And it's something because I mean he's only in his early 60s,
oh
so it's something that, from my understanding, again, this is third party information because a lot of people really don't
oh
want to talk about it. But that's what I got, that he wanted to go the natural route, and people were like, look, you need to go to the doctor. Then finally, they convinced him to go to the doctor, but it was too late.
Well, again, above all, condolences to that man's family and loved ones. And again, just to dispel any thoughts out there, when I said Amin Ra, I was just referring to Kemetic kind of Egypt kind of side, like people like that. I wasn't even making a direct to the man himself. But again, I'm sorry to hear, because it's it's sad. But going to your point right there, what you said about the herb, I completely agree with you, Dynast. And I'll go a step further. I believe that the herbalist and the healthy eating route and all that type of stuff, I think maybe some of that stuff is good for symptoms. Like, you got a headache, maybe you don't need to take a million, pills. Maybe you can take, like a nice tea and get your mind right and, meditate. I think, yeah, there are some, but you're right. There are clear points. There are clear points when, guess what? If you don't go see the people in the white jackets in the hospitals, you're going to be likely to die. I call a lot of those people out, the herbalists who read the Dr. Layla Africa, the Dr. Sabi readers, because when somebody comes and does something egregious, like shoots up the blocks, or somebody gets stabbed, or someone gets hit by a car, we don't call them, man. We don't call them guys with that knowledge when that happens, because we know that at that moment of severity, we need something that we need to give it our best shot. I say to a lot of people, would you bet your life on it? And the reality is a lot of people wouldn't. And that's what kind of scares me a little bit when I see a lot of people out there going through the internet, picking up all of this information from people who may or may not be qualified to talk about at all. How can you talk to me about what to be given my body in a time like this when you are misnaming parts of the body? Like, you work somewhere else doing an average normal fit. All right, that's fine. I'm not saying you need to be some Harvard PhD Rhodes Scholar to be my doctor. But at the end of the day, there is a point when I say we do have to respect doctors. I have a saying. I say that medical apartheid is not an excuse for medical stupidity.
Say that. Repeat that again.
Medical apartheid is not an excuse for medical stupidity. Like, there comes a point where, guess what? And I'm not denying that there has been egregious things done to African and Black people across the world, in the world of medicine, as with a lot of different things in life. But there comes a point, like, okay, if you really want to hold that for, I'm not saying that we don't forget. I'm not saying that we forget it, but there's a limit. Like, there comes a point where we do got to start paying wise attention to things. I always said to people, it wasn't real to Black people until Idris Elba got it. It wasn't real to Black people until Kevin Durant got it. It wasn't real to Black people until Scarface got
it. You said Chance the Rapper got it.
No, Kevin Durant.
Kevin Durant, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't real to half of the Brooklyn Nets got it at one point. Like, it wasn't real until certain things like that. And our problem is that will cost us lives. There's certain things which, yeah, like when I see people with the 5G conspiracies, oh man, I feel so hurt in my head. I'm like, I just keep saying to people, make it make sense to me, and no one can do it. Nobody can give me a legitimate explanation as to how the radiation from 5G causes what specific side effects. All it ever is 5G equals bad. And there's a great example they use in some scientific or medical circles and that. And they say, all right, then, well, in that case, ice cream causes skin cancer. And they say ice cream causes skin cancer. And they say it because if we were to just take the link between skin cancer and, well, those people have ice cream, so ice cream means skin cancer. Well, actually, are we not looking at people who might live, for example, in a hot country, outside, shirt off? And obviously it's different for us as Black people, in Africa and all that. But you get what I'm trying to say. If we just take one link and call that the link, then that's not good enough. And that's something I really was stressing to a friend of mine on the phone. We was having a good discussion yesterday about this. And I said, at the end of the day, the reason why I'm sending so hard for the wild conspiracy theorists that can't back it, the reason I'm sending so hard for the people out there who may or may not have the proper knowledge and training on this to be giving out information is because I expect better for us. Why can't we have the same chances of survival at this with, you know, not always it has to be the same, but why do we have to go to such wild limits? Like, why can't we instead push for things that we can really, you know, say that we've seen the evidence of? I remember hearing on your show the other day, I think it was the brother Holip said something like, you want to scare some of these niggas, then say the words peer-reviewed paper. That killed me, bro. That absolutely killed me, because it's the truth. That's the part for me, which is the big one, which is, all right, then, if you man say that 5G or all of these other conspiracies are why coronavirus happens, even though I can keep debunking them, they say 5G, there's no 5G in like Iran and Ghana and certain places in the world. So how does that help? How does radiation create a virus? Explain it. But I don't know, man. Like, we need to be careful, because we are not in a position to gamble as a people globally.
Right, but even the doctors don't know how to treat it, which is true. Like, the doctors have no clue. Basically, the doctors, what they're doing, they're treating the symptoms. Like, for me, I had a fever and I had pneumonia. So they just treated my pneumonia and my fever, and they were like, the virus would just run its course.
Absolutely. So, and that's another part where I don't think Black people are stupid, especially not the conscious community or so-called conscious community or people who think certain types of ways. When they keep saying novel coronavirus, it's a new thing. And that's why for some people out there with the conspiracy, like, not you, but like with some people, they're like, yeah, but every time you turn around, they change in their mind and they change this, they change that. No, unfortunately, it's hit us quickly. And in time, yeah, the research will be done. They're looking at this, they're looking at that, and then the research will develop. And, you know, I feel the hardest for those who unfortunately probably would have been able to prevent an early death if they'd have got it, let's say, in a year or in 6 months or whatever, just due to knowledge. But we still do, as you did, we still do gotta consult with those medical professionals and get that treatment, because seeing a guy with 3 duvets and a towel over some steaming water and some ginger as some WhatsApp video of how to beat coronavirus, that's not good enough for me.
Hold on 1 second. What is this? Is somebody calling me? Like, what are you doing? Hold on 1 second. What is this? I don't like. Don't call me during the live stream. Like, don't call me. Hold on. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. Is that you or me?
Oh, that's you. Hang on a second.
Because I don't see the call.
Yeah, that's you. Well, it was you.
Oh, go ahead. They hung up. Go ahead.
But yeah, well, basically, yeah, I expect better for my people. And I'm willing to challenge anybody. I see a lot of people, and do you feel that you see a lot of people where now it kind of feels like on one side, there are the so-called sheeple who follow anything that mainstream media throws at them blindly without even questioning it. And there's also people that do that on the other side. Like, they'll not follow anything that's given out nationally, no matter what it is. Do you feel like you sometimes see that?
Oh, that people just follow whatever the media says?
Yeah, but equally, it goes the opposite way as well. So, for example, yeah, like there's loads of people I know, and we all know those coonish types that just absolutely believe anything that's on CNN or all these other type of stuff. But then there's also other types of people that's like, I won't believe anything at all ever. And I'm not saying that you should be one or the other. I just believe that everyone should take everything and like discern it. You know what I mean? Like, you should take every bit of information you get from mainstream and not mainstream media, and you should be able to think. You know, unfortunately, not everyone will be able to, but you should be able to think. I see a lot of people that's just immediately like, because it's in the media a lot, and because some famous people have got it, it can't be real. Like,
Pan-African Strikes Back. I sent you a link, bro. So if you want to call in, I sent you the link. All right, go ahead.
But yeah, it's for me, I feel like my position is this: like, if it comes off of the TV, doesn't mean it's necessarily the truth. If it comes off the internet, doesn't it mean necessarily it's the truth. And yes, it's a confusing, interesting time. The number one thing I think we can do is just where possible. For some people, it's going to be easier than others. For others, it's going to be not possible at all. But where possible, we just need to avoid passing around diseases for the sake of it, or putting ourselves in any extra level of danger, without reason. You know what I mean? If we are in positions where we can work from home, then do your thing. If not, then protect yourself at all costs.
Now, Dave, I heard the story of, I guess, a sister in the UK who went to the doctor. She had coronavirus. They just sent her home and she passed away. Do you know more about that?
Yeah, I heard the story. She was deemed not a priority, and she was sent home. And again, I'm not too versed in every single detail, but I did glance that story, and I did hear of that. Again, that's where I overstate again. Medical apartheid is not an excuse for medical stupidity. Equally, that can also remind us that we shouldn't be medically naive. We know that in certain regards, sometimes we're not viewed in the same way, or sometimes they tell us something and it's not in our best health interest. Again, that's where my frustration comes in with a lot of people who just want to sit and give me a conspiracy. At this time, we need community, not conspiracy.
Right.
If we're in a position where we're suspicious of the medical authorities, then we need our own people in the community that are calling people saying, hey, how are you? Hey, how are you? Did that sister have family, friends, a community group that was maybe even just documenting how she was feeling, or someone that could come check in on her? This is why we need community. Because for me, the scariest thing would be, and I'll look to see if I can find the story, but God forbid this happens and somebody dies alone in their own home. And we need that community aspect. I'm in a part of a couple group chats. Every couple of days, I just put a message in there saying, is everybody okay? Does anybody need anything? I can drive, I can do this, or I can donate some food or whatever. It's just about checking on each other. Because unfortunately, we may not always get the fair treatment from, wherever.
Yeah, that's good. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was having lunch, but basically, Dynas, we do not have institutions that are conducting studies and sending out information on how to engage the coronavirus as of right now. So, due to our lack of infrastructure and community, we have to rely on the information that's given to us by the European controlled mainstream media. That's our fault. But what we can't do is just use the fact that they've lied to us before as an excuse to be negligent and irresponsible concerning this virus, to the point that our people are dying at a disproportionate rate compared to everybody else. If they have an agenda against us, well, then they have to have an agenda against Asians, Mexicans, Samoans, Cambodians, and everybody else, because they too are dying from it. The only difference between us and them is that we are being silly, acting as if we're immune to it, and it's costing us, right? We all have to react the same way to the information, because none of us have that. The Mexicans, Cambodians, whatever, they don't have it either on a large scale. So they just follow what the CDC says, the EPA says. We have to do the same. And we have to, if we see the misinformation being spread, it doesn't matter who it's coming from, we have to step in and interject and correct our people and tell our people, do not listen to this person who would never even attend your funeral concerning a matter of life and death, something that will kill you.
I could not have said that better myself, and that is absolutely that's what I found myself doing. That's why I keep finding myself having the same argument with people and getting quite ticked off by it and just saying nah, I'm sorry, but I am not gonna just let you sit here and tell me that garlic, turmeric, and flipping this is gonna save us, because it's not. We need better. And for me, I say this: if our most mistrustful are now only seeing fine, let's put our money and let's get our own medical institutes with our own doctors, our own peoples. If we're going to be super, we should be skeptical. We should build that infrastructure. We deserve that infrastructure. But if we don't have it, those of us who are going to be critical. Those of us who do, for the lack of a better term, have a bit of fight about us. We have to fight to make sure that these ideas don't just go around and permeate, because we got too many people with asthma, diabetes, obesity, all these things in our community anyway. We wasn't the healthiest group of people, like, yeah, we can be healthy and we're athletic and all that type of stuff, but yeah, we still do have all these things, these diseases that permeate our community, leaving us susceptible for death.
Everybody has these type of issues in their community. White people, Mexicans, etc. Right? All of our diets are the same. We live in America, not you, Dave, but us, me, and Dynas. But the thing is, it's all about how you engage it. It's all about how you react to information. In every group, every chat, every feed, there are people who are there trying to find out true, genuine information, and there are people who are there trying to perpetuate conspiracy. We have to speak up for the people who are really earnestly looking for the truth and the facts. The people who, if a person is seeking truth, the truth will sound right to them and they will follow it. Trust me, because I was that person, right? But if a person is seeking stupidity, just drama, they'll find that. But we have to be there to create a balance to the stupidity, because right now the dudes who are the misinformed dudes are winning because they're the most vocal. We have to create content. I put something up, if Dynas doesn't mind me saying, I just put something up on how to disinfect your house during this COVID epidemic, on how to disinfect your mask, and on wearing a mask. This
can you go to just a small detail about how to properly disinfect your house and your mask real quick?
Okay, so first of all, you need to go to the EPA website where they have a list of all the cleaners that actually kill COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2, which is the actual SARS-CoV-2 is the actual virus. The COVID-19 is the sickness that the virus causes. There's a lot of cleaners that kill it. Anything with bleach in it, anything with ammonia in it, anything with lactic acid in it kills it. But because our shelves are picked bare, we have to now go really look at the ingredients and find things that kill it. If you don't got cleaner, hydrogen peroxide. You can also use that to spray down your mask when you're done using it to disinfect it. Basic things that could save lives.
All right, go ahead, Blue Major.
I'm not here to debate with anybody, but what I am going to do is just present a series of facts, and then you guys can make a decision as to what you make of those facts. And everything that I'm going to be presenting and saying here is actually by doctors. I've actually sent over links to this information to Dynas. So if you guys would like to go ahead and see this, Dynas can post those for you to go ahead and it's back me up, because Dave, one thing you said is you'd like some actual scientific backup. So I've actually submitted that to Prince Dynas before I actually got on here, and Dynas can go ahead and confirm that. So the first thing I'm going to say is the reason that I personally have very strong hesitations about this entire thing is, for example, the actual lockdown protocol in and of itself. So all of these lockdown protocols that exist throughout the globe, particularly in Western countries, include provisions that say that even though you are in lockdown, for example, Los Angeles, which has some of the most aggressive lockdowns currently, allows people to go to the grocery store. For example, Pan-African strikes back. You're inside of your car right now, which means you're outside of your home. Now, I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong. I'm just pointing that out. If this was an actual airborne virus, okay, and I know this because of my own research and my own study, if this was an actual airborne virus and this was a real lockdown to prevent the spread, or as they would say, flatten the curve, which means they're not actually preventing the spread. What they're saying is that they're trying to space out the spread in such a way that hospitals and other medical infrastructure is not overwhelmed. Now, if that was the actual case, this would be a full-blown lockdown with martial law, military on the streets, and you would not be allowed to go to the grocery store. Because you have to actually understand what a grocery store is. A grocery store is an enclosed space with large numbers of people around it, around food.
Let me stop you right there. I think I caught my coronavirus at the grocery store.
Okay, now let's actually address that. Now let's go ahead into your symptoms. Your exact symptoms were that you said that you felt a sharp, so aggressive pain in your lungs where you were unable to breathe. Is that correct?
I couldn't breathe. I had body pain. I was diagnosed with pneumonia. I had a fever of 102.
At the beginning of this so-called outbreak, doctors were being told through, especially, for example, in the state of New York. I have sent you a video of this by an actual physician, not a scared nurse, an actual physician who said that they were told to go ahead and diagnose in a virus, a new virus, quote unquote, that is causing acute A2E or acute pneumonia. Okay. However,
hey, did you get a test when you were in the hospital?
Excuse me?
Dinus, did you get a test when you were in the hospital?
Yeah, I went back to the hospital and they swab. How they test you? They swab your nose.
Okay.
Dave, I actually have information about the actual test itself, but before we get into that, those symptoms that you have actually described, by the way, are actually more more likely to be symptoms you would see of, for example, high altitude sickness or oxygen deprivation in the lungs. So here's what this actually means. Here's what what doctors are actually seeing. The way that this so-called virus is actually behaving, it is not behaving or moving like a virus that is causing pneumonia. That's not what is happening. What it seems to be happening is that it appears that the lungs are being deprived of actual oxygen. So when people are put on ventilators, the ventilators are not actually helping with recovery. As a matter of fact, according to a doctor in New York who is the head of one of the largest hospitals in New York, the ventilators are actually seem to be making symptoms worse in the most vulnerable populations, which are your older people or people with weakened immune systems. Now, the actual COVID test, this test that people have been talking about, it's an RT test, meaning that it's testing RNA, not DNA, and it's not testing an actual isolated virus.
Is the COVID virus an RNA-based virus or a DNA-based virus?
Dave, let me explain something to you. The actual test is testing what it's doing is amplifying by 45 times genetic material to actually identify a virus, Dave. And I'm sure you know this because I'm going to assume you're a scientist. You would understand that the procedures for that is that you have to go. There's certain steps. First, you have to isolate the actual virus. Then for it to be confirmed as a virus, then you have to inject it in something and another living creature that does not have the virus. And does that creature then will have the conditions of the virus, and then you need to be able to remove it from that living creature, and then that creature then does a recovery. This COVID-19 virus, up to this point, has still not yet been isolated. And the next thing I want to go ahead and say is the actual pictures of it scanned under a microscope, by the way, unisolated, looks like a spherical organism with spherical spikes that surround it. Now, here's something that's very, very interesting. When a cell is poisoned, an actual cell, any cell in the body, what it excretes is something called an exotome. An exotome is a naturally occurring phenomena in the body. Everybody has it. When an exotome is essence functions as is it tells other living and healthy cells, watch out, there's something that's happening, so the body could begin the process of creating necessary antibodies to go ahead and cure whatever's poisoning that cell. I think that cause exotomes could be a number of illnesses, but also things like stress, fear, also electromagnetic radiation, amongst other things. Now, people are saying that it's 5G. I am not here saying that it is 5G. However, tests have been done on lab mice and have proven that electromagnetic radiations above 60 megahertz, which, by the way, is the electromagnetic waves of 5G technology, does in fact poison cells and cells are deprived of.
How are cells poisoned? Wait, let's go into the science of that. How are cells poisoned?
Cells are poisoned. So anytime you get sick in any way, that is the reason that you are sick is because in essence your cells are poisoned. Another way that happens is stress, electromagnetic radiation, stress, fear, things like that. Now listen,
can I say something?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, look. So with the 5G situation, I get it, Lou. I feel you on that one. Here's what we know for a fact. When we were on 2G, right, back when we had flip phones, the military had 3G. When we were on 3G, the military had 4G. When we were on 4G, the military has 5G. They have up to 10G. That is not just now entering itself into our world. This is something that's already existed. Now it's being opened up for the military's patent on it has expired. Now it's being opened up to the cell phone companies to disperse out for monetary gain to the public, right? 5G didn't just come into existence. And when the 5G's radiation is so strong, even 4G's radiation is so strong that it would annihilate any virus because the viruses are extremely weak and sensitive to radiation.
Right? I'm saying to you that according to a lot of prominent scientists who are for whatever reason being silenced right now, this is not an actual virus.
Don't start with that, Dynas. Don't start with this silent stuff. That's conspiracy stuff right there.
No, this is not conspiracy. Listen, let me ask you a question, Dave and Pan-Africanist Strikes Back. Where are you getting your information?
Okay.
I'm getting my... Oh.
Okay, yeah.
Let me get so government website.
No.
Or...
No. I'll tell you right now. I'll tell you right now. I'm a martial arts instructor in Newport Beach, California. I have students who are doctors, lawyers, surgeons. Right. That's why I have a 3M mask. One of my students, I got the 3M, the one nobody can get. One of my students brought this to me. Professor, here, wear this when you go outside. I have students who are engineers, scientists, people working for Procter & Gamble. I never speak unless I have real information from real sources.
Then if you understand that, then your friends, and go ask them, if this was an airborne virus, which is what this is saying that
I never said it was airborne. I never said it was airborne.
The reason wearing an N95 mask is because of the fact that it's apparently an airborne virus.
The reason why I'm wearing an N95 mask is because if someone sneezes or coughs near me and spit comes out of their mouth and touches my lip, we've all had that experience where people sneeze or something and some of they spit, or even when they talk, they spit come out. Like I told you, I'm a teacher, so I talk to a lot of people. If that spit comes into connection with my mouth or anything like that, and I like to touch my face a lot because I have this beautiful beard, so I'm wearing the mask because I want to protect my mouth and my nose from anything going in there, whether it's not vapor, it's liquid, when I'm talking to people or when I'm just out in public, because we got a lot of nasty people out here.
Explain to me why, if, for example, in your state right now, and by the way, this is not just your state, this is everywhere. If this was the virus that was spreading at the rate that it's spreading, and including Atlanta, Georgia, where you're at, where you apparently contracted the so-called C-COVID virus that happens to look exactly like an exotome. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm saying, why does it look, but that's not even relevant. Why are grocery stores
first COVID?
Wait, hold on.
COVID is the illness that's caused by SARS-CoV-2. COVID is the illness. The virus is SARS.
Go ahead.
It's SARS.
Luke, I got a couple things, right? So I'm just gonna rattle a few off. One, with your point about grocery shops, you're right. People do still go into grocery shops, but what is the nation supposed to do? Starve? Now, here's a big thing. Hold up. I'll let you have your time. Wait a second. Wait. Hold up. Let me finish this one real quick. You see, again, it depends how you're handling things inside these shops. You see, one thing I am noticing in particular is this. My perspective on this is going to be different because the coverage of what I've seen in Italy and Spain is different. Now, for me, when I go into shops, because of the social distancing they're putting in place in certain shops, you have to keep a certain distance. They're not allowing a certain amount of people in the shops at any one time. Still a risk, absolutely. But at the same time, then, okay, what is the alternative? Let's go to something else right here, which is you keep saying, where do I get my information? My question is it's not always sometimes about where do we get our information? What is our qualification to speak on certain topics? Guess what?
I can give you my qualifications.
I stand next to somebody who teaches, I don't know, skiing. I don't have the knowledge to even know half of what they're talking about because I don't know about that. And when I see people talking purely about information, yes, you're right. Anyone can read and people of intelligence can go get their own information. They can go find out a lot of the truth. But guess what? There's also a lot we don't understand because in those 4 or 5 years of medical training, whether you're a nurse, paramedic, whatever, there's certain things which you are learning. And it's just my opinion, which is that not everybody, and I'm not to say yourself, but sometimes I do have to turn to people and be like, bruv, you don't even know the first class day, like the first thing you learn on the first day of half of this, like of all the stuff you're talking about. You read one paper and then all of a sudden we know. And let's just go on another perspective here, which is this, right? You keep saying that about the lockdown procedure. Let's talk about the lockdown procedure as a whole. What is the alternative? If there is no mass testing in a country, then there can be no way that you can just let people roam around and do this. Go look at Sweden. They started off with no lock. They was like, no, we're not going to do it. We're going to let people go with the herd immunity, etc., etc. That's why they are second guessing and they are changing rules often. Look at Japan. They started off the same way. They was potentially going a little bit slower than other places. They're declaring states of emergency. Every place that we go and we see people drag their feet seems to turn around. And as much as I say that just because the masses of people do something doesn't mean it's right. But
can I say something?
Go for it.
I just want to say this. Lou Major, I really like every time you talk, you drop in jewels all the time. I actually message Dynas after every time you get on, telling them how awesome what you say is. Here's the reality. We are the ones who are actually taking the time out to research this stuff and gain information. Then we get on YouTube and different media outlets and share it directly to our people and give our perspective. But no one knows enough about this situation. Even you are still in the process of gathering information. While we gather information, while we learn what this is and how we need to engage it, it is our responsibility to encourage our people to take the necessary precautions as outlined by the CDC and the EPA and all these places, because we don't know what we're facing. We don't know how to fight it. Black, white, whatever. So guys, stay inside, sanitize, do what they're telling you to do for right now. Soon as we find information contrary to what they're telling you to do, believe us, we'll be here to give you the information and share with you whatever you want.
What I'm actually concerned about, hey, listen, if you guys want to be extra sanitary, do whatever the hell you want.
No, give direction, Lou. Give direction.
Hey,
information is good, but direction is what's needed.
What I'm saying to you is right now, I don't know if you understand what's actually happening, but you Pan-African and Strikes Back and Dave and everybody else who's getting on here do what they say to do. You are telling people to voluntarily give up their civil liberties to the United States government or other governments in which countries that they live in.
I'm not saying that.
Hold on.
They already do.
Wait.
I'm not saying
hold
that.
on. And yet you're not taking the time to listen, Dave. Listen. You are allowing fear.
So just go out then. If you don't want to do it, then go volunteer at your hospital, disobey the lockdown, and go do what you want, bro.
Dave, let me say this. Dynas, let me say
Dave,
this.
you're being way too emotional about this.
Dynas, let me say this.
What I'm
Go volunteer at your hospital. Go touch everything with a plain hand and lick your fingers, bro. If you don't believe it, then you don't believe it.
Exactly.
Can I say this? Can I say this? I'm not telling anyone to give up anything. That's
what you're telling people to do.
Wait, Lou. I'm not telling anyone to give up anything.
That's exactly what you're saying.
Lou, let me finish. I'm not saying that. I said disinfect your house, clean your hands, and clean a mask and wear it outside if you go out. I didn't tell anybody to follow the government, stay inside, none of that. I said if you isolate you and your family, but if you want to go out, do what you want to do, and I hope you got your guns and your ammo ready if they come for you. But in the meantime, wash your damn hands, protect your kids, clean your surfaces, and make sure that you aren't contracting it if it is really a threat. Be prepared is what I'm saying. Damn arguing with you or anybody else about what we're giving up. Be prepared for anything that might happen. If shit hits the fan, you got to be prepared, period.
When did we have
but here's the thing. What I was hearing.
Lou, hold on. If you want to leave your house, no mask, no gloves. If you want to go to the grocery store and lick the handle of the grocery cart, but go for it. Nobody tell you that.
Prince, it's not that I'm saying that people should do that in general, virus or no virus. What I'm actually saying is the fact that people should have the right to do that, virus or no virus. And before you go about the process, Dynas, before you go about the process of allowing the government, which is what you're doing right now, to tell you that you can go outside or can't go outside, you better damn sure make sure you understand what the hell is going on. And here's what I'm hearing right now. I'm not telling anybody, go and lick toilet seats. There are some idiots who got online and have done that. That's ridiculous. What I am saying to people is, right now, out of fear, because that's what it's happening here, everybody's scared right now about this virus, make sure, and in that process of fear, as has always happened throughout history, we give up civil liberties that we never fully get back without ever actually understanding what's going on.
Should we not
so here's what I'm hearing from everybody. Dave gets real emotional. Everybody gets real emotional because you're scared. But do you actually understand the virus? This virus? Do you actually understand what it is?
What is your qualification?
Do you care to find out, or are you going to believe what they tell you on TV?
Hey, you guys, just bring it down a little. Bring it down a little. Calm down.
Hold on. Let me get this in. You can say what you want. The last time we gave up major civil liberties was 9/11, 2001. Or soon after that, in which case we were led into a frenzy to believe that certain governments had weapons of mass destruction, and so we had to take these civil liberties away from people so that way we could go ahead and stop terrorism. Turns out all of it was a lie, and we still have not gotten those civil liberties back. So now, again, we're voluntarily giving up civil liberties, and there's not one person on this call who can tell me as much as I actually know. Because, by the way, I don't sit there and talk about my qualifications, but I have a master's in biochemistry. So I know more about chemistry, biology than both of you guys combined, with all due respect. And what I'm trying to tell you is that what I'm trying to actually tell you as a person who actually studied this stuff, I'm not a biochemist, but I went and got the degree and who has also talked to other people in the field. And I can actually back that up by actual conference footage. I could give you the studies if you want to read it, or I could give it to you in a video format if you want to watch it. If you don't want to read through the drudge, I understand that the way that this so-called virus is behaving, it is not behaving like a virus that is attacking the lungs. It is the way the lungs are actually looking. The symptoms is more so like, for example, imagine if somebody was on Mount Everest without any protective gears and no time to acclimate. It's as if you were 30,000 feet in the air and you had no type of air mask or anything like that. In other words, your cells.
Let me stop you. Okay, so I've contracted coronavirus. I have had altitude sickness before when I climbed Kilimanjaro. Trust me, this coronavirus is worse than the altitude sickness
but the symptoms are similar, Dynas. That's not
no. It's
the inability to breathe.
Okay.
That was not.
Lou Baker, let me tell you something. When I had altitude sickness, all right, climbing Kilimanjaro, when they took me, you're right, I had issues breathing, but those issues went away in a couple hours, and I was fine the next day. This coronavirus has been lingering, like literally for like a week straight. I couldn't get out for me to get out.
Dynas, I understand what you just said, but what I'm actually saying is the symptoms. Your symptoms may be worse. But what I'm actually I use that as an analogy to give people some examples. Because the idea is because your cells, Dynas.
Lou, what I'm saying is, when I had my altitude sickness climbing Kilimanjaro, I didn't catch pneumonia. People are coming down with pneumonia. People are coming down with respiratory diseases. Like, you don't necessarily get that with altitude sickness if you're climbing up a mountain and you don't acclimate.
If anybody can go online right now and look up symptoms of altitude sickness. And one of the things that will come up is a lot of people who do get altitude sickness, it does lead to pneumonia. But I'm not going to get into that argument because of your emotional experience. What I'm actually saying to you is the way that the virus is acting, it is acting as if the cells themselves, especially cells of the lungs and within the lungs, are being deprived of oxygen, proper oxygen. That is not what pneumonia does.
May I please say something?
That is not how pneumonia works. Pneumonia. So what I'm saying to you is, again, Dynas, check your email. There's a 10-minute video. It's 10 minutes if for people, because I know a lot of people don't read 150-page papers.
May I please say something?
Go for it.
May I please say something?
My sources are peer reviewed, but I know most of you guys are not going to read a 150-page paper. So I went ahead. So there are clips from conferences that I personally attended that I went ahead and that I posted and that I sent over to Dynas for him to look at.
May I say something?
And by the way, if I wanted to be conspiratorial, I would challenge every single person who's listening to go ahead and go into YouTube and write in the term event 201.
No one's going to do that probably. But can I just say something?
Okay, so then here's the deal. Are you interested in actually knowing facts, Dave? And
can I say something?
Listen, hold on, Lou Major.
An agenda.
Lou Major, I'm about to bring on a doctor, actual doctor on this trip. I'm gonna email him the link, and then.
Hell yeah.
Can I say something?
Yeah, let's bring in Pan-Africans right
Bring on the doctor.
Can I say something, please?
Go ahead.
Okay. I don't want to be interrupted. That's why. Lou Major, I understand everything you're saying, and I love your passion, and I know you're a very detailed person. I am too. Here's the thing. The conversation you're trying to have, in my opinion, is not the conversation for this particular video. What you're talking about is something that we should get together behind the scenes and talk about, so then we can take the information and give it to our audiences so that they can be informed. This is lost in this video because what it's going to do is it's going to have the opposite effect of what you want. It's not going to fuel people to go out and research. What it's going to do is give all these people spreading misinformation, rumors, and terrible evidence, not even evidence, but just misinformation. You're going to give them ammunition to continue to spread BS. You're going to give them ammunition, which emboldens them in their ignorance, as opposed to giving our people information that they can then go and research and then make adjustments and engage this coronavirus situation appropriately. And I think
stupid people are going to be stupid either way, Pan-Africanists. So worrying about stupid people doing stupid things is irrelevant. They're stupid. What I'm saying to you is my actual concern is the fact that we are voluntarily, again, by the way, this is what I'm saying. We are voluntarily giving up civil liberties without asking any appropriate questions.
I got a question about politics, not about that one, right? You keep saying we're giving up civil liberties, yeah? I'll be the first to say this. When were we first in control of anything? What like you in America, me and you, like when could black people like just up and jump and say, do you know what? No, we're not gonna shut down the economy. No, we're not gonna take this seriously. We're gonna stand up and we're gonna what would we do? Even on the continent, unfortunately, are we 100% in control of absolutely everything all the time? No. So my question is,
Dave, are you advocating right now that because we're black and uneempowered, we should just allow our civil liberties to be taken without putting up any fight or investigating at all? Just believe what the government says? Because, hey, at the end of the day, we're black and too weak to do anything about it, Dave. Is that what you're saying?
Everyone can see you running with that one, bro. No, I'm saying this, right? Instead of living in some fantasy where I'm just going to lead some black revolution and then I'm going to stop all of the economic downturn that's come down with this, I'm saying, you know what can we do? We can keep ourselves clean. We can avoid infection, especially from those who are in countries where you're going to have to pay for healthcare. Like, we can avoid these things where possible, wait till things get better. And then afterwards, like Pan-African said, then we can have different conversations and different discussions. But my point is yes, you're right. Okay, fine. There may be a giving up of civil liberties, but when did we have like a full control of this anyway? Because if I'm to follow it on another side of the argument, okay, what do we do tomorrow then? Let's all just bun it all off, yeah? Tomorrow, what do we do?
We're talking about a community.
1 second. This is my only issue, Lou, with the people that are like, especially in the black community, don't allow them to take your civil liberties. Okay, so when are they going to come and lead the revolution against stopping the government from taking our civil liberties? That's my issue. Like, I get it. I hear you.
Prince, that's a really good cop-out, but here's the thing. In every single case that civil liberties are taken from the populace does consent to this. So they cannot take your civil liberties away. Like the Patriot Act, for example, that is still right. That allows the government to listen to every single one of your phone calls, etc. Wait, Prince.
I have a doctor that's coming in, so we're gonna allow the professional to come in.
That's fine. That's fine.
Dr. Swain, how are you, sir?
Bravo.
Good. What's going on? How
You're an actual Dr. MD, correct?
Yes.
Can you give us some background information? In fact, let's address the conspiracy theories. Is coronavirus caused by 5G?
So
there's no research on that.
Lou, I'm gonna kick you out. All right, go ahead, Dr. Swain.
So that's been something that has been touted around. We don't have any evidence to suggest that, but to let you know, the mechanism that they're saying is that 5G is lowering people's immune system and making them susceptible or more susceptible to the coronavirus. The actual virus itself is real. It's not caused by 5G, but there is speculation that the spread of the 5G technology has lowered people's immune system to make them actually susceptible to the coronavirus. And we have no real evidence to really know whether that's true or not. Particularly from the healthcare professional side, we have no idea because we're not information technologists. And those are the ones that would really understand what 5G is and how it's networked. But it's not yet clear as to how that affects human physiology.
Okay.
I have a question. Can you explain to me as a doctor, because I'm pretty sure, can you explain to me the COVID actual test? What is it testing and how does it work?
So COVID virus, there are two main types of viral types. There's RNA virus and DNA virus. DNA, you've probably actually seen before. It's where you've seen pictures of spiral. It looks like a staircase and it kind of twists on itself. That's DNA. And the difference between DNA and RNA is that DNA has a number of blocks and it has a corresponding block on the other side, which is the reason why it's able to make that complete ladder. RNA, however, is kind of the stepsister of DNA. It's just a message. And so generally, RNA carries all of the information and it has to go into another cell and it uses that message to recreate more copies. Well, coronavirus, what happens is when it infects a person's immune system, the virus itself transfers the RNA or the message into the body. And then once it's there, the body's own immune system secretes antigens or defense proteins to try to attack the virus. And that's how we know that an individual has been exposed or has coronavirus in their bloodstream, is because the body secretes a certain type of protein that we can detect. And so when we do a test for coronavirus, what they do is take a blood sample and they do what they call PCR, which is polymerase chain reaction. And that's where you find the protein strand that corresponds with the sequence for coronavirus, and you amplify it or make larger copies of it so that it can be seen. And then you expose a particular type of receptor into that same blood that the coronavirus sample is in. If coronavirus is present, that protein will attach to the bases of the RNA pattern. And then we have a special immunofluorescence or a special protein that lights up. When it makes the connection with the coronavirus receptor, that protein lights up and you can see it. And that's a positive test. And that's the same type of technology we use if you're trying to test for pregnancy or trying to test for HIV. It's the presence of those antibodies that we actually visualize on the test. We don't visualize the virus itself. We use polymerase chain reaction to make larger copies of the virus. And then we expose the virus to see if certain type of proteins are expressed. And then if those proteins are expressed or visualized or immunofluoresced, that's how we know that viral protein is present.
Doctor, there's two questions I have for you. Number one, up until this point, has the actual coronavirus itself been visualized? The second question that I have for you is, isn't those type of tests that you just described highly susceptible to false positives? As a matter of fact, I believe the person who invented the test in 1984, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, and you could correct me on this, actually explained that this test is not necessarily the most ideal test for detecting viruses themselves because of its susceptibility to false positives. Is that not correct? If so, if it is incorrect, please clarify.
So to answer your first question, has the virus itself been visualized? Yes, it has. We actually know what the virus looks like and we can create the sequence. And coronavirus is just a general term for this virus. Coronavirus itself is a generic term for a whole class of viruses. There are a number of different
That's correct.
Those are also coronaviruses. This particular subset of the virus is called COVID-19, and that's because it's novel and it was discovered in 2019. But yes, that virus has been sequenced, and the sequence that most like the NIH, the sequence that they're using, I believe they got that from China, but they're able to sequence it themselves. So to answer your question, yes, we've seen it and we know how to sequence it and we know what it looks like from a molecular structure. The actual woman who is leading the NIH study to find a vaccine is an African-American woman. Her name is Corbett, Corbett. You can look her up. But she's one of the main postdocs who's looking at the virus. The second question.
Bet we didn't know that.
Yeah, to actually discover a vaccine. The second question you asked was, can you remind me what your second question was?
These, in general, RNA testing that, in essence, from what I understand, you're excreting genetic material, and out of that genetic material, based off of certain proteins that you can identify, you would then say that the virus is present. Isn't that type of testing highly susceptible to false positives?
So not highly, but depending upon the type of test that is being deployed, it is susceptible to false positives, but it's more likely to be susceptible to false negative as opposed to false positives, which means that it could prove a test can be done and it could say that the result is negative, but it actually is positive. And that's because the reagents may have expired or they did not accurately detect corona protein that was present in the blood, but it really was. Does that make sense? So the likelihood—
No, that makes sense. I actually understand what you're saying. However, as you pointed out, the key to that test is the amplification of that genetic material to go ahead and see if coronavirus or those proteins that indicate coronavirus is present. However, doesn't that amplification, especially when it goes past 45 times, make the test a little bit more suspect? From what I understood, now remember, you're a doctor, I'm just a master's. Anytime you amplify these tests past 45 times, the more you amplify it, the more you, and that's instead of looking for a needle in a haystack, you create a giant haystack, meaning that you're more likely than not going to get indicators of something that may not necessarily be there.
No. So you're saying you have like 70% of that correct. The portion that you're missing is what I was explaining, is that the more you amplify, there is a chance of error, but the error comes in the fact of you being unable to detect protein that is actually present. And so it increases the likelihood of you having a negative test when actually the test or the protein is present. And so a patient did a COVID-19 test and it said the test proves to be negative, but it's a false negative. The patient actually is positive because the protein, although you amplified it, you degraded it, or the reagents present didn't work, and so they did not appropriately detect the protein. But if the protein is not—
what you're saying is correct. You have a test that has ability to be false in terms of positive and ability to be false in terms of negative.
Luke, hold on, Luke. Okay, we got the doctor on here. Okay, let him finish. All right.
No, your theory is accurate, but your interpretation of what you're saying is not. What I'm trying to impress upon you is that yes, it is correct that as you amplify it, you can amplify it so many times that the protein may become degraded, or the reagents that you use for the test may not work accurately. But then that puts you at a higher likelihood of getting a test that says that this is negative, that the protein is not present. When in actuality—
I got a question. For the doctor.
Lou, listen, you're not going to interrupt the doctor, Lou. Let him finish.
I thought he was done.
No, he's not done. Go ahead, Jawari.
So in actuality, there's a higher likelihood that you will miss protein being present in the bloodstream than you would to say that protein is present and it really is not. Does that make sense?
I got a question for you, Doc. I got a question. Actually, I got two questions. First question is this: let's take the coronavirus aside. Are there any viruses that have ever been caused by radiation? And I know there's many specialisms in medicine. I'm not sure what yours is. I'm not saying that you're the be all end all, but is there any viruses that are caused by radiation? And the second question is there anything that's being shown or that you've seen that can help us, fight and reduce the symptoms or the risk of contraction of
Good
COVID?
question. Good question, and thank you for asking. So that you know my background, I'm actually from Atlanta. I did my undergrad degree in cell and molecular biology. Went to medical school. I did residency in general surgery. I did at the Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. I did my master's in public health at the Harvard School of Public Health. I did a fellowship in cardiothoracic surgery at the University of Pennsylvania. And I did a super fellowship in heart and lung transplantation at the University of Pennsylvania. And so COVID reaches me because when patients develop end-stage lung injury or end-stage heart injury, which is the usual sequela of this disease when it becomes advanced, we have to place the patients on ECMO, which is called extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. It's a heart and lung machine. And so we use that to try to help offset the work that the heart and the lung has to do while the body recovers, if it's going to recover. They've not utilized us very much because it's become evident that once this disease becomes so advanced stage that it causes heart and lung injury, the patients aren't able to recover and they die. But to answer your question, there has not been, to my knowledge, a virus that we're aware of that's caused by radiation. The pathophysiology of those two are completely different. Now, radiation can cause your body or your immune system to be susceptible to viral infections. And we know that to be the case, particularly in the setting of if you have patients who have had a prior history of like Hodgkin's lymphoma and has undergone radiation treatment. Those patients tend to down the line be more immunosuppressed and be receptive to or have more vulnerability to viruses, diseases, and even cancer down the line. So that is true. It's an indirect correlation, and I think people who make the statement that radiation causes the viruses don't quite understand the mechanism because they're not at all related. But what is true is that radiation can, or someone who has undergone radiation, it can reduce that individual's immune system such that it can make them more susceptible not only to viruses, but also other cancers.
Okay, thank you, Doc. Thank you for that. That is, you see, that's what I'm talking about when I say good quality, high quality information that we're actually getting out here. Now, thanks for that.
Not a problem. And then your second question.
Is there anything being shown to help fight or reduce symptoms or risk of contraction of COVID-19?
So, I think that's up for speculation. Every day you hear more things about it. And it's what has struck me as being interesting is that every time we find out more information, people postulate about it with such poise and confidence. And then the next day something new comes out. And so what I do know is that, there are some things proactively that you can do that are kind of natural based that will help enhance your immune system and therefore minimize your vulnerability to the disease. But right now, there's no clarity on what exactly would be an appropriate cure for, or that would prevent you from getting prevent you from getting COVID. For instance, I think the President Trump had mentioned, take chloroquine and, it'll cure the virus. Well, then there were people that started just taking hydrochloroquine, and then they end up having cases where people were poisoned from it because they took the wrong doses, or they took the medication and it was not indicated, or they had some other, side effect from it. And so what just came out recently was that there seems to be some protection from the virus in amongst populations who come from countries who have undergone BCG injections. And if you're not familiar, BCG injection is common amongst people who are from the Caribbean or from different African countries. It's an injection that you usually get in childhood to prevent the contraction of tuberculosis.
Yeah, we got one. We do it here in the UK. Like, it's one of them ones like you get in school.
Yeah, and so a lot of people are speculating that individuals who are inoculized by BCG are more resistant to catching the infection. And that's one of the reasons why they're saying that the uptake of the virus is lower in a lot of the African countries. That may or may not be true, but that's one of the speculations. The other speculation is that anti-malarial medications, hydrochloroquine being one of them, and other helminthic medications like drugs that fight against parasites might present a protective response against the virus. It's unclear that that's true, but that's the speculation because they're seeing in countries where people routinely take these medications, they're not seeing as high of an infiltration of the disease. Now, what could very well be happening is that they're not seeing a high infiltration because those individuals or those countries don't have the same level of testing that we have. And so there could very well be cases spreading that we're not familiar with. But also, a lot of the African countries are being more vigilant about doing tests and have been more vigilant about closing down their borders. And so they may have prevented the spread at a much more aggressive rate than we have. I can speak directly to Rwanda, which is a place that I work in closely, and President Kagame shut the borders down immediately and instituted a very strict testing regimen as well as hand washing supplies all throughout the capital city.
Are people with COVID becoming sicker due to being in the hospital?
To try to minimize the number of patients or the number of people who were contracted. And so during the early, indication that coronavirus was present, they were able to know exactly who had it and where it came from.
Doctor, can I ask you a question? And some of my colleagues who are not medical doctors but are scientists have brought to my attention the fact that the virus, in terms of its visualization, that's why I asked you that question, seems to appear to have the same appearance, have the same behavioral patterns, and seem to do the exact same things as naturally occurring exosomes that cells secrete when poisoned for various reasons. Can you give me some of your insight as to why that seems to be the case? That's the first question that I have. And actually, why don't you go ahead and cover that, and then I'll formulate my other question. But why does the virus seem to have the same behavioral patterns, appearance, and even biochemical structure as a naturally occurring exosome that the cell secretes when it's been poisoned?
Well, I think that's probably the case because it's made up of naturally occurring building blocks, as most viruses are. A virus is a living and a non-living entity. And so it's made of some things that we find in all cells, like proteins and RNA, which is the messenger carrier for cells that have nuclei. So yes, you will see kind of that same sort of exoskeleton, but the message that it's carrying is very different.
Doctor.
And that's what makes coronavirus different from, or COVID-19 different from SARS and different from MERS, because it carries a different message.
However, when SARS and MERS was visualized, I could be wrong in this. Please correct me if I am. They visually did look different, and they had different biochemical agents within them. They behaved differently. This is the first time I've personally heard of a virus that looks exactly like an exotome, acts exactly like an exotome, has the exact same structure and biomechanics as an exotome. So I'm not saying that it's fake or anything like that. I would never say something like that. That'd be ridiculous. But it is. What I am saying is it does seem to appear and behave the same way. And also, Dr. Seidel out of New York, he recently has come out and he's saying that his biggest concern is the fact that this virus does not seem to be.
But Lou, at the end of the day, Lou, I hear you, bro. But when are you going to come out here and join the front lines with Dr. Swain? That's just my thing with all the conservatives and all these people. Like they're online, they're on the internet, they got all the information. Okay, well, come and join the front lines.
May I ask a question?
Certainly.
Dinus, I don't think that that's necessarily the line of reasoning that you wrote down.
Oh no, wait, no, let Pan African speak. I want to hear this question.
That's not necessarily the smartest approach. Let's go ahead and not do that.
Well, to just to answer your question again, real quickly, you know, some of what you're saying is true and verifiable, but that's sort of the reason how it got its name. It's the novel coronavirus, which means that it doesn't behave like the other viruses that we've seen. And that's sort of why it has caused such enigma amongst the scientific community. And that's, again, the reason why it's taken so long to try to develop a vaccine, because it's behaving and responding in a way that we've never seen. That's why it got its name.
Well, what I'm saying to you, Doctor, where I'm coming from is that it seems to be that this virus seems to primarily be more of a virus that is affecting people with compromised immune systems. As in, I'll give you an example. In Iceland, they did more testing than everybody else, 5% of their population. Half of the people who came back COVID positive were asymptomatic. And most people with strong immune systems seem to make full recoveries. What I'm saying to you is it appears to be that, I'm not saying the virus is fake, but I'm saying that the people that seem to be most susceptible in terms of it actually doing major damage or harm, everybody can catch the virus, but who's doing major damage or harm are those with compromised immune systems. And those who are the 5Gers, I think what they're saying, or where they might be coming from, is that since 5G seems to possibly lower your immune system, isn't 5G causing a situation where it's causing the general population that would otherwise not be as susceptible to COVID in terms of damage or death or things like that, to be more susceptible because of the electromagnetic radiation over 60 megahertz? Are those people really just nuts for pointing out what seems to be a reasonably logical position to take, or am I missing something here?
Yeah, I think you're probably missing some things that a lot of people are, and that's information. Because you know, it's not true that it's just affecting people with compromised immune system. We've seen an entire spectrum of individuals that are being affected, both Black, white, young, and old. We've seen people that have not otherwise been healthy that have died from this. And we're not really clear. What we do know is that the people who have underlying comorbidities don't have the resilience that other people may have to try to fight it off. But there are clear examples of people that have died or near died or have been put down because of the virus. And it's irresponsible for someone to believe that this is just a hoax or a conspiracy theory. It's a real thing. And the unfortunate thing about this situation is that there is a disproportionate number of African Americans or Black people who do have underlying comorbidities or who don't believe that coronavirus is real, and they're being affected by it. And not only that, data has now been released that they're being disproportionately not only infected, but the death rate or mortality from this virus is disproportionately affecting Black people in all major cities that are predominantly Black, with the exception of Atlanta and DC. But I think that's only because we've not begun to escalate the testing in those cities. But if you've noticed, Detroit, for instance, or Michigan, or as a state, 14% of the population is African American, but 40% of the infected population is African American. And so that's telling you that they make up less than 20% of the total population, but almost half of the positive cases are Black. The data came out today from Chicago, where almost 70% of the population that's dying from COVID comes from African American communities. The same thing is the case in New Orleans. And so, and these Black people that are dying, they are primarily those that have comorbid issues, but it's also people who have strong immune systems, but they lack regular health care, or they lack access to, they live in food deserts, and so they don't have access to regular nutrition to, at baseline, strengthen their immune systems. Or they live at home in a family of 8 in a 1-bedroom apartment. And so one person gets it and the rest get it. I'm just talking to a friend. My cousin has a friend in Chicago. He was sick about 2 weeks ago. He's still sick. And the speculation is that he likely had coronavirus. Now his mother, who is 78, is in the house. There are 5 people that live in that house. She's had shortness of breath, a dry cough. She's been in the bed since Saturday. She has a fever of 102. Dynas, you can correct me or not, from what you've heard, that probably is positive.
Right.
And so, you know, all those people have been around her in the house. They took her to the University of Chicago today. They actually took a test and then sent her home. This woman is 78. She has a low likelihood of surviving tomorrow. And part of that is because she's older and she has underlying comorbidity. But there have been people younger, much younger. There have been babies as well and young people that have died from this. And, you know, I think the error that the media is sending out is that we know exactly what group or population that is most susceptible or vulnerable to this. And I don't think that's absolutely accurate.
I have a question.
Well,
though.
isn't
I have
Black
Hold on.
I got a question, though.
Hold on. Go ahead, Dave. Go ahead, Dave.
This from me and from Pan African Strike Back, which is going to the hospital and being admitted putting us at more risk of dying from COVID-19?
I think depending upon the hospital setting, likely so, because one, the hospitals are being strained, and so they don't have a lot of resources available. And then two, what we've seen here in Philadelphia, you know, a lot of the healthcare workers are carrying it, and many of them could be asymptomatic, and they're transmitting it to patients. And so, you know, I think it's a kind of a catch-22. One, you want to go to a health provider when you start noticing symptoms, to push to get a test so that you know what you can protect yourself from and so that you can appropriately quarantine yourself from others. But the value of being in the hospital with mild symptoms is very low because much of what would be done in the hospital can be done at home, just ensuring that you self-quarantine and keep your loved ones safe by distancing yourself. However, there are instances where the symptoms become so overwhelming that to stay at home is going to be a death sentence, and you likely need to be in a hospital in order for you to be monitored more closely and to receive any type of antibiotics or supplemental materials. For instance, like oftentimes, and what we're seeing is that the virus can cause a pulmonary pneumonia. Some people can get over pneumonia at home, but once they get to a certain level, it'll compromise your ability to take in fresh air, and then you can eventually suffocate or die from hypoxia. And so you have to go to the hospital in order to be placed on the appropriate antibiotics, sometimes supplemental oxygen. And then what we're tending to see in advanced cases, people are requiring ventilators, and mainly because the shortness of breath is becoming so severe that they're able to maintain an appropriate oxygenation. And so that's why the ventilator piece comes in. The virus itself doesn't necessarily cause people to have respiratory distress, but rather it causes lung destruction and a subsequent formation of pneumonia that leads to hypoxia as well as hypercarbia, which is the inability to exchange carbon dioxide. And that in itself can worsen your ability to breathe.
Doc, can I ask you a question? Thank you for that last answer, because I was going to ask that question and it gets straight to the point. But aren't the ventilators aren't people dying on the ventilators? Would you say the ventilators are saving more people or killing more people? And why is that happening?
So that's a good observation. You know, people are dying on the ventilators, and there are some who speculate that the reason is twofold. One, that people are becoming so sick that by the time they get to requiring a ventilator, then it's hard to rescue them from the disease. That's one scenario. The second scenario is that some people have speculated that the way in which we're managing the ventilators, at least early on, perhaps worsening the underlying condition and not treating the actual pathophysiology of the virus. What they're now finding out is that once people are affected by the virus, there's a subsequent pro-inflammatory response that causes blood clotting and that attacks end organs. And that itself may be the culprit to why people are succumbing to the infection, not primarily the lung hypoxic disease or disorder that they're experiencing as a result of. And so in early stages, and even now, we were treating patients on the ventilator as if they were developing a disease syndrome called ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome. But I think what they're finding now is that treating the ARDS is not the only, approach to solving this dilemma. That these patients also have to be supported in another way. Some people have suggested giving immunosuppressant medications to try to help minimize the pro-inflammatory response. Some people have suggested giving heparin or Lovenox, which are blood thinners, to try to thin the blood, which is another component of the pathophysiology of the disease process. But to be completely fair and honest with you, I don't think we quite have a sense of the exact mechanism or the exact kind of formula to use to treat this. And it's kind of a human nature. People have a hard time saying, "I don't know." And you felt that pause, like when you say "I don't know," it like leaves people dumbfounded. And so, because of the message that's saying "I don't know" sends, you oftentimes end up hearing a lot of people postulating or speculating. And then when it's something that we've never seen, particularly like this, that's why it's called a novel coronavirus. We try everything. And so I think, we're still in the learning process and still trying to understand, one, how this works and how we can get past it. And there, fortunately, are a good number of people that are getting the virus and creating disease and are surviving. But there's also a number of people that aren't. And we have to figure out how we can, from our standpoint, figure out how to prevent the transmission of the disease. And part of the way we're hoping to do that is by social distancing, staying at home, shutting down, any areas that have large congregations of people. And that will prevent the virus from being spread any further. But the second arm of that is going to be trying to create a vaccine such as you minimize the additional spread and new cases of the virus. Because you can social distance all you want, but if there's still a herd of people that have the virus as carriers, once you release people back into the environment, there again goes another opportunity to distribute the disease, unless you have a vaccine that can prevent new cases from happening. And so that's the fear that I think a lot of epidemiologists are not sharing publicly, because, when they say flatten the curve, that's under the speculation that the distribution of the viral infectivity is under a naturally distributed curve. And what that means is that the curve goes up and it comes back down. But if you don't have control on the other side of that curve, you'll begin to see a phenomenon, and you have, I guess, the aggressive measures that we put in now. You'll begin to see a phenomenon that I think China is bracing for, and it's a binomial distribution. Bi meaning two, and so what happens there is that the curve goes up and comes down, and then once you release people back into the population, the curve goes back up. When the environmental conditions are such that it promotes more viral spread, and so like you'll see it probably go down in the summer. And then in the fall and the winter, again, where people have more likely to have compromised immune system and more vulnerable to the spread of disease, there's a chance that you'll see it come up. And that may very well happen, because even as we look at the timeline for vaccines, Johnson & Johnson is one of the firms that is at the forefront of developing a vaccine. They won't be starting their in-animal trials until about August, September. That won't make an in-human vaccine available until the beginning of January, February, and therefore it won't be available through mass production until the spring. So we still have almost a year before an actual vaccine will be available. And then when you look at the uptake of the flu vaccine, most people outside of healthcare workers usually tend not to get the flu vaccine. So I think that we're going to see a challenge in getting people to take this vaccine unless it becomes mandatory, just like now measles, mumps, rubella, and Gardasil. But even those people are able to decline. So it's a big problem.
That's a question I got.
Let Lou Major. Go ahead, Lou Major. I know you got a question.
So, Doctor, that was. I'm actually glad you brought up the flattening of the curve, etc. Here is my question
Oh, I think he
What
dropped
role could herd
off. He
immunity
dropped off.
possibly? Why haven't we taken the approach of, for example,
Hold on, Lou. He dropped off. Hold on.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right,
sorry.
Lou. Ask your question, Lou.
Doctor, why haven't we, or why are we unwilling to, for example, isolate your more vulnerable population, people who in general have compromised immune systems, and maybe isolate them, and then allow the rest of us who have the rest of the population who may have stronger immune systems to kind of develop a herd immunity? Because what you're describing is a W curve similar to 1918 with the Spanish flu. But what I'm also saying is based off of what you're saying is it sounds like we're going to be going in and out of these aggressive lockdowns for a year until a vaccine is developed, when it sounds like this particular virus, obviously your vulnerable population needs to be protected. Your older people, people who are sick, poor people, for example, need to be protected. I completely understand that. But what I'm also saying is that is this type of a complete other shutdown that we're dealing with right now ultimately really frankly necessary, or even from what I'm hearing from you, even relevant? I actually matter. It sounds like again, my whole concern has always been the giving up of civil liberties for something that may not necessarily merit that. And from what I'm hearing is we've given up our ability to move for movement, but it doesn't even sound like that's going to actually work. If what you're saying is correct, why aren't we just simply isolating people with compromised immune systems and allowing the rest of the population to develop a herd immunity to this thing?
No, good question. And perhaps I should be more clear in my messaging, because I never said that it wouldn't help. I said that without a vaccine, then we're going to have a bigger problem. But there are two issues there with what you're saying. One, it's hard to identify who's a vulnerable, individual. I mean, you're saying you're healthy, but as a physician, I can look at you, I can say that you would be surprised at what your health profile would look like if you went to a physician right now. So you've no idea what your baseline health is like. The second thing is that that's just it. The problem is that it's the people who are quote unquote healthy that are being carriers and are asymptomatic and affecting the vulnerable population. And so it is, I actually, my view from a public health perspective is that your liberties end where mine begin. And so if you are carrying a virus and then you come into an environment that puts me at risk without my choice, then that's no longer an exercise of your civil liberties. The second thing is that in order for us to be more clear that we are not putting people at harm, you have to have aggressive measures. And I would actually argue that the measures that are in place are not aggressive enough. We should shut everything down, including grocery stores, restaurants, Ubers. People should not be able to drive. You need to shut everything completely down. And that's exactly what China did in order to get control of this virus. Because we're still putting in, and Dias, you can send it to him. I sent you, I don't know if I sent you that video where they demonstrated how people were wearing gloves and, they thought that they were protecting themselves, but gloves were actually causing a problem because they were contaminating their cell phone and their keys and their car, and then still, with gloves. And so, it's those, it's that cross-contamination it's the healthy people that are the problem. It's easy to identify the individuals who don't have, who have underlying comorbidities. But, the challenge here, unlike, for instance, like Ebola, they were able to really aggressively take measures to contain Ebola, because Ebola, once you get that disease, the symptoms are really, and they show very quick progress. It's a very devastating hemorrhagic disease. This differently is that 50% of the people almost who are getting this don't even show symptoms, or their symptoms are mild. So you can't even tell who does or who does not have it. And then we don't even have a clear picture as into how it will respond in certain individuals. Yes, those with underlying comorbidities have a higher risk of mortality, but there are individuals who have a strong immune system that are young, that have no other pre-existing comorbidities, that have either died or have had a difficult time fighting this disease off.
Doc, can I ask a question?
Well, let me do this. I'm going to end the questions from the panel. I want to get the super chat questions. So let's see here. I had a question up here. Yeah, I had some super chat. Guys, if you super chatted, do me a favor. Go ahead and put your question back in the chat room if you super chatted. I wanted to get these super chat questions, but Pan African, go ahead and ask your question, Pan African.
The question I was going to ask is, and I'm sure many people are wondering this, if this is such a easily passable disease or virus, why aren't we seeing higher numbers of doctors and nurses coming down with COVID-19?
That's just it. We are seeing I don't know if you've paid attention to the New York news, but there have been a good number of providers that have come down with COVID-19. There have been a good number of doctors that have died from it. And that's because they've not had, that's why the whole concern around PPE is around, because, you know, these people have contracted the disease they are suspecting through occupational exposure. They didn't have appropriate PPE available, and therefore it made them more susceptible to the disease. And so that's why that controversy exists. And so we are seeing providers die.
In over in the UK as well, like one thing I've seen a lot of is that we at 8 o'clock on a few days, like most people like stand outside their window and start like giving a round of applause as like a big national support to the NHS, because there's been such an uproar about the whole PPE thing. Over this side, they did say like a lot of doctors in Italy, Spain, and France did like contract it. There's been a couple nurses over here as well that did get it and unfortunately passed from it as well. So, I mean, I'm not saying like I'm no doctor, nothing like that, but that is definitely something from a UK perspective, which is kind of big in our media at the moment.
The guy, to give you some background, the gentleman, the first doctor who diagnosed COVID-19 and tried to warn the Chinese government that it was a problem, he died. And he was 35 years old. I have his, I'll look up his name and I can
Li Weiling.
Yes, exactly. And then as well, if you look at the Chinese experience, the providers there, if you look at what they put on for PPE and look at what we're using here in the US, there's a very strong difference on how they protected themselves than how we have protected ourselves.
Hey, Dr. Swain, somebody in the chat room who super chatted wants to know, do you believe in vaccines?
I do. You know, I think, you know, but that's because of my public health background. I think that vaccines are helpful in helping to, if not prevent, minimize the symptoms of disease. As a healthcare provider, I'm mandated to get all the major vaccines, but I do understand people's reservation in getting them. And I think that if I were posed with the mandate to get a COVID-19 vaccine, I think that I would be reluctant to do that, but mainly because I don't understand how it would work. And having seen the devastation that it causes makes me pause at that proposition. But I'm mandated by my profession to get the flu vaccine every year. In my job, you know, you have to sign a waiver and also risk being, you know, sent home without pay if you don't get the flu vaccine. And there are also a number of other vaccines that are mandated. And part of that is not necessarily just to protect myself, but also to protect the patients that I've come into contact with. Okay.
All right. And then another question was, is it possible to duplicate and modify it artificially, COVID-19?
It absolutely is. I think, you know, all you have to do is have the sequence, and you can genetically modify it and change it into something different. And that's sort of kind of where the concept of biological warfare comes into place. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's not a lab that's already done or that is not actively doing that.
Wuhan virology.
Yeah. And there's speculation that's how this started, because Wuhan is one of the major. It has the base for one of the major biological testing sites in the world, and people are speculating that it was through that experiment that some of the animals that were tested were sold to the nearby food market, and that was the transmission from animal to human. I don't know how true that is, but it is one of that was one of the early theories. In addition to bats.
May I say something on that?
Yes.
What happened was there were the wet market, the Wuhan virology lab, and a little town in the Wuhan province are in close proximity. In the town, there's miners that live in the town who go into the nearby caves to mine minerals. There's bats in there. The miners breathed in the fecal matter of the bats. The Wuhan virology lab sent a team out to test the people who live in that province. They found 6 people out of 218 people had this new novel corona. They took bats and blood samples for the people back to the lab, and some of the researchers contracted it after they had manipulated it, trying to find a cure for that particular strain of the SARS virus. And then those people went out into the public, into their families and stuff like that, and they also did distribute some of the animals to the market for food, and that they get money for that. And that's how it that's what I've read. My research has shown initially led to the introduction of the virus into the population.
Okay. Hey, Jabbar, let's see here, Dr. Swain. What do you think about using, I can't pronounce this, tocilizumab in patients with moderate disease versus waiting till it gets severe?
Tocilizumab, I think that must be a autoantibody. I think anything that we can do a controlled trial on is reasonable to trial, particularly in this setting where we don't have clear evidence about anything that works. The problem is, the timing and the timing that it takes to try to put together a controlled, randomized study. It takes the order of months before you can actually get those results out and to be able to, prove definitively, unless you have a high N or number of individuals that participate in the study.
Okay.
Can I ask you a question?
All right, this is the last question, and then we're going to log out. Go ahead, Lou.
Well, he had a question.
Sorry. No, quick question. This is just me asking from a scientific. What could CRISPR technology possibly be the solution for this? And that's one. And two, if this virus is as severe as we seem to be implying that it is here, as you are implying that it is, why is the mortality rate 2 or 3%? Why does it have such a low mortality rate? Is it due to a lack of testing? And could CRISPR technology maybe be the solution to this by simply just changing DNA sequencing that it automatically is immune to such a virus? I was curious about your thoughts on that.
Okay, so just for clarification, CRISPR technology is, for those people who don't know, it is a gene sequencing technique that is for DNA, not for RNA. And so there's a difference there. The coronavirus is an RNA virus. You could perhaps adapt it to RNA, but CRISPR technology in what we use it for now is employed for DNA. Does that make sense?
Yes, I was assuming that the implication of the question was that there would be an adaptation for it, adaptation to CRISPR because of the versatility of the technology. But then the second part is explain to me the mortality rate. Why is it so fantastically low? Why do most people who contract this virus seem to recover? And help me understand this in terms of how it separates itself from, say, a flu, where some people die but a majority recover.
So we're still trying to understand the mortality rate, because I think when it was early on, people were saying that fewer people die from this than they die from the flu. But if you notice, even in the news reporting, every day more and more people are indicated as dying. And there are situations too. I think the number of people that are reported dying from COVID underestimates the number of people that are actually dying from the disease, particularly because not everybody is getting access to tests. And so there are a number of people that are just being found dead. And it's being presumed that, it's a natural cause, but we have no idea whether or not they died from COVID. So we don't really even know really what the incidence of death is. But I think early on, they were saying, oh, well, it's only, it's a lower incidence or low incidence of death. But that was with the early experience with China. But now we've seen the global spread of it, and we've seen every day more people are dying. So I don't think that we can clearly say what the incidence is in finality. We are suggesting that, it has a low incidence now. But as more people are being infected, we're getting a higher number of people that are dying from it. And even those numbers are underreported because, again, there are still states where people are dying, but they've not been tested. And then as well, there are states, and this you can find this on the internet. There are states where people have died, and they're not going to test them because they're already limited on the number of tests. So why would you waste the test on a dead person?
Cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, Dr. Swain, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day and coming on and setting the record straight, you being a actual professional.
No, I thank you for inviting me. I wasn't. My intention wasn't come here to set any record straight, but rather to provide education. I think if I could just real quickly, encourage everyone to take this seriously and to please practice social distancing. Yes, I do understand how it can feel like an encroachment on your civil liberties, but as a matter, it's our responsibility as our brothers and sisters keeper to try to minimize the spread of this disease. And so if we can just at least try to stay in and be responsible, I think that, we can get beyond this. But so thank you so very much for having me on.
Anytime. Everyone, thank you so much for joining. Make sure you go to dynastymirror.com, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Until next time, family. Peace.
All right. Take care.